Hello again. I'm always a little suspicious about ideas which cannot be expressed in simple words and explained to ordinary people. Often, people in some field or other, whether it's out of motor vehicle maintenance or philosophy, use special jargon so that people can't really understand what they are talking about or proposing. This is useful as a garage if a man there wishes to bump up the price and make this piece of work on your car sound fiendishly complicated. Philosophers and social scientists use the same tactic when they're advocating a dangerous or wicked course of action, and they hope that people won't sufficiently understand what they're saying to spot what they're about. I was debating a chapter of a book on critical race theory with Bella from the YouTube channel Middle English Manuscripts on Sunday. I give a link to this in the description to this video. She's going to release it at 12 today, that's midday, and she will be online to answer questions about what we discussed. In other words, she's making this a premiere, so she'll be present. She'll release it at 12, and then she'll talk about it if people are interested. What I found worrying is that we read through a proposal for the fragmentation of society and instigation of mob rule and vigilante justice, along with segregated schools and a host of other terrible proposals. And Bella did not seem to understand what was being said. This is it's a problem I've noticed with clever people. They sometimes fall into the trap of supposing words to be the substance of the world and real things and events merely shadows of no consequence. I see things from the other perspective. I see the real events as the actual thing, and words are just a reflection. Rather than getting too bound up with the words themselves, I tend to ask myself, what is the nature of this thing? What does this mean in real terms? Here's an example of a passage from the book which we discussed. The attitude of some black people towards law and order is being expounded. It's phrased in such a highfalutin way that it's a bit difficult at first to spot what's being suggested, let alone see the dangers involved. As some viewers will know, the Black Lives Matter movement is broadly in favour of abolishing the police, and that explains the context of this passage. The opposite perspective within the black community is sometimes called the politics of identification. Persons of this persuasion identify with the race rebel aspect of some black criminals and support them, at least if they are young, redeemable, and a potential asset to the community. African Americans who hold this view want the police to leave certain black offenders alone and let the community handle them. Anti-snitching campaigns in black neighbourhoods are evidence of this attitude. It all sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? Letting the community handle them. How would they do that? By putting them on probation? Locking them up? Hanging them from a lamppost? This is a blueprint for lynch law and vigilante justice of the kind seen in the frontier days of America. As it happens, I have personally seen this kind of community justice in practice in two different places. One was the so-called no-go areas in Northern Ireland, which were still going strong until July 1972 when the army moved in. The people who enforced action against criminals at that time were the IRA, and they did this by beating people with pick handles, shooting them in the knee, and sometimes putting 9 grams of lead in the back of their neck. I also saw this same kind of community justice in Lebanon during the Civil War. Some viewers will recall the necklacings in South Africa, when those accused of some crimes were punished by the community by being burned alive. I have never seen or heard of a community dealing with criminals which does not end up this way. Yet the idea is presented here in such a casual way as though it's something that might be worth trying. Elsewhere in the same chapter we read, nationalists are apt to describe themselves as a nation within a nation and to hold that the loyalty and identification of black people, for example, should lie with that community and only secondarily with the United States. Here is a recipe for civil war. The establishment of a state within a state. Nothing is said in the book of this danger, and the idea is simply presented as something we might think about. The two people who wrote that book are intellectuals, of course, which means that they probably assume that everybody around them is likely to be able to discuss this sort of thing and consider abolishing the police and rejecting the authority of the government without it really making all that much difference. When I asked Bella how she thought the community might deal with criminals, she suggested that social workers might be involved. I honestly wish that the people who play with these dangerous ideas could have seen what it was like in Belfast in 1972 or Beirut in 1978. Rather than social work, dealing with criminals in those places at that time always seemed to entail the use of things like pliers, knives, electric drills and firearms. I think that I must make a separate video about the fact that fancy language often leads to this, because I seriously doubt if any of the law students reading this book have enough experience of life to know what is really being talked about here. I give the details of the book which we discussed in the description above, and as I say, at midday the discussion with Bella premieres and she'll be online ready to debate with those watching it.